Welcome to the Catch Up podcast, hosted by me, Phillip Blackmore. Today, I'm joined by Musonda.
Because you encounter challenges in programs, you want someone who can say, do you know what, on my previous program, when we encountered something like this is what we did and this is how we rectified it.
It's communication from the top down into why we're doing this. So the people, the SMEs, the users, they understand why we're doing this change.
The pace of decisions tells you whether a program's going to fail or not. Because when you try to manage the people that need to be led, you're going to frustrate them. When you try to lead the people who need to be managed, they'll fall behind. Nowadays, we have Gen Z, and I absolutely love Gen Z. They get a lot of bad press, but I will stick up for Gen Z any single time.
We talk about her journey into being a D365 program manager, but we also cover her recent experience moving into her role as a public speaker. Musonda, thanks so much for joining me today. I know we've been speaking a little bit prior to today. And I always say it to everyone, I think one of the things that I really do appreciate is your time, because certainly one thing that we can't get back is time. And for you to come on and speak to me today, I do really appreciate that. So thanks for coming on. I'll introduce you as I know you do a multitude of roles now in everyday life. You aren't just a program manager, and you don't just specialize in the Microsoft Dynamics space. You do a multitude of other things, including public speaking, motivational speaking, and all sorts. And I'd love to share a little bit of detail about that as we get later on into our conversation. But firstly, and program management being such a varied role in many ways, you get a program manager that can program manage a build of a manufacturing site, or you get a program manager that runs an IT program like as you do yourself. I'd love to just talk about very much in the first instance is a little bit about your career journey, Musonda, how you got into the IT technology space, and how you become a program manager for all sort of younger listeners out there that are sort of maybe grads and thinking about, well, how do I become an IT? How do I become an ERP, a Microsoft Dynamics program manager? What does that career journey look like? And I know it's not a one size fits all because people get into it in all sorts, but yeah, a little bit of your backstory would be a great way to start, if that's okay.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for having me, Phil. So it's an honor to be invited to speak to you today. So my career journey has been not very linear, which is most people's journey anyway when it comes to program management, because when I went to university, I did not know what a program manager was or even a project manager was, which is where I started from. So I went to university to study law. I didn't want to go. I didn't really have an option. I'm African. You go to university because that's the only option you have.
Yeah.
So I studied law and I didn't really enjoy it. I didn't enjoy it at all. I thought I would because of the kind of person that I am, but I didn't. I found it too much theory, not enough interaction with people, which is what I'm good at. So I then ended up getting a part-time job as I worked as I was at university, working for a healthcare agency that was doing placing locum nurses and agency workers into like different hospitals and care homes. So because I'd been at uni for 3.5 years and I was working in this space for 3.5 years, pretty much, I became one of the longest members of employees. So I stayed on after I graduated. They were working on the back end, like enrolling people, doing their timesheets, resourcing, planning, and all of that. So I learned so much from that job. But I ended up wanting to move away and go and have life experience. So I decided to start applying for jobs in London. I was living in Nottingham at this time, and I was just applying for any random job. The key was I wanted to make a lot of money. That was my only criteria. I didn't care what the job was. So in my application process, I ended up landing a job in Indonesia that I didn't know I had applied for. So I ended up going to work in Indonesia in a sales role. Again, didn't like it. It was financial services, didn't like it at all. But that role led me to Qatar, working in financial services. It was while I was in Qatar that I made friends with a girl who was a business analyst. She was actually in the D365 space. And her name is Precious. She's still very active in the D365 space.
Yes, I know the name, yeah.
Yeah. So it was Precious who I was speaking to, and I said, look, I need to do something. And she was like, why don't you become a project manager? Because I feel like your personality would fit that. Again, I didn't know what a project manager was at this point. So I wrote down the courses I needed to do, and eventually got my Prince 2 certification and started applying for project management role. But what I had to do was assess the skills that I already had, the managing people, the planning, the resourcing that I did in the agency, and all of those skills, and put them together on my CV to present that I had some project management experience. Obviously, even though I had a Prince 2 certification, I didn't have worked experience as a project manager. So I ended up landing a job on a Qatari government program that was doing it was 5 billion US dollar program. It was doing multiple streams of work, but the company I ended up working for were IT stream, and they're doing the network infrastructure and CRMs and everything else. So I ended up taking a role as a program governance administrator or something like that. It was some fancy term.
Yeah, yeah.
Basically, what it was is I worked with the PMs to support
Hmm.
them with their planning.
Got it. Like a PMO type role.
Like a PMO type of role, but it had some fancy name, like governance
Yeah, yeah.
name or whatever. But it was from that role that I understood about planning, working project plans. I had a program manager that I used to work very closely with, who taught me how to use that Microsoft Project. And that by the time I was leaving, I was so good at Microsoft Project. People were asking me for advice on it. So yeah, and then I started off from there, and then I moved up into managing projects myself, and then became a PM, full on PM, and then became a senior PM. And then going from senior PM, I started working bigger programs, and they said, why don't you manage the PMs on this program? And that's pretty much how my journey went. So it started off from curiosity, a desire to make more money, and
Hmm.
a random friend who decided to, looking at my
Give you
personality,
some
that I would do
advice.
well. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's
No,
my
it's
journey.
it's it's amazing really just how, careers, careers happen and how you end up landing in these roles. But it is also right, I think, what you mentioned there, and what is so important is what matches your personality. I think it's really important. I always say it now, and sometimes friends of mine who maybe have sort of children that are going to university sometimes say, would you have a chat with them, and they're sort of asking for like career advice. And it's really difficult when I find when someone's sort of 17, 18, and they're sort of, you know there's a lot of pressure, I think, for people like you say, like, and you had it very much so in terms of that sort of element of pressure of you must go to university. Like, and you're sort of sat there, and it's such a young age to make a decision about what your career is and what you're going to study, um and it's not always the right thing. And I get it. Sometimes it's great for people, other times it isn't. And then if we look back to your sort of, when I look sort of the sort of program management roles, where was your very first touch point with sort of Microsoft Dynamics? Did you see that out in Qatar?
That was in Qatar, yes. Yeah, so that was in Qatar. It was it was CRM. The program that we had were doing a contact center. So that was my first time getting involved in D365. And in the start, I wasn't leading the program. I was working with the PM that was leading the program. And then over time, I started being more involved in it. And then from there, when I moved back to the UK, I got a role with a housing association. They were
Was it
trying to
like a
get onto
bespoke,
D365. It was a
like probably
bespoke in-house housing management system, but I genuinely forget the name of it. But yeah, so then we were they had a major acquisition, and I was given the role to sort of merge everything together, not just the technical side of it, including the people side of things. And then I moved on from there and went to work for a Microsoft partner who where I worked on the CRM side, and it was the first time I started doing F&O, because the program I was put on was a hybrid of CE and F&O. And I think the reason that I have actually done quite well in D365 is because of my overlap in the two areas. Most project managers or program managers either only have one experience with one area, but I ended up doing that hybrid program that had CA and F&O and Power Platform. So it was sort of like a fusion of everything, and it helped me understand the nuances and the differences in delivering these programs, because I still believe that they have to be delivered in a different way. Most program
absolutely.
directors and most account directors who sell the platforms, who sell the tools, tend to think that they are the same and they need to be delivered the same, and they don't.
And do you think, Masonda, that's part of because, and as you're talking there, it started to get me thinking about a question that I'd like to ask you, and the difference between a FinOps, a D365 FinOps program, and the difference between the D365 CE program is part of that, in terms of, because obviously CE, sales, marketing, FinOps, generally finance, operational aspects of a business. Is it because you're facing off with different, and again, it's like you talked at the beginning, but you're dealing with different stakeholders within the business. You're dealing with different I guess, yeah, different stakeholders, different line managers, different people that have slightly different minds. Because I can imagine like a sales and marketing work stream and people that operate within that aspect of a business are quite different people to deal with than, the finance director or the finance manager or the finance controller. Is that something that you have to consider when you're looking at a program like that? That when you're crossing across FinOps and CE in terms of how you engage with those different profiles and personalities?
Yes, I think that is one thing, but I think the biggest thing is the way that organizations operate in the marketing side of things, or the finance side. So, for example, many organizations will have the vendors that they have to work with and set up on their system. They'll have suppliers, and they'll have an invoicing process. It's very rare that it's very complex. They always say, "Oh, ours is very complicated," but most of it is quite similar that will fit into the standard FinOps setup. But with CA, most of it is customized because every organization will have a different way that they do their marketing. They might have some things that fit in the standard
Sure.
model, but it's the
Yeah.
way that they have the customizations that are required. So, for example, I worked on a program where again it was a joint program with CE, F&O, a bit of Power Platform. But the challenge with that program was everyone sitting at leadership level, program director, solution architects, they were all F&O. And then it was just me who gets the CE and F&O bit, and then some PMs who only get F&O. So the biggest challenge in the program was that the CE guys, the technical guys, saying we cannot run to the standard F&O way to do things, i.e., go and do your requirements, go and do the configuration, come and show the clients. With CE, there is a lot of customization that you cannot follow that standard model because you tend to build an iteration. That's why CE tends to work better when you use Agile or Scrum, because you build an
Fine.
iteration. So you're showing it slower as you go
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's very customized. Whereas with F&O, it's easier to sort of get it built up and show the clients standard things, and they can see themselves, that they can visualize how things would work with their business. With the standard, they might need some customization at some point. I'm not saying that's not needed in F&O ever. However, it's not to the extent that CE needs it. But then also, to your point with the personalities, of course, we all know how accountants are versus how marketing people
Yeah.
are, creatives versus people who are
Hmm.
very like structured, and
Sure.
so having the ability to deal with those different stakeholders, having the ability to understand, I almost say, one of my project managers once said to me on a program I worked on, says, "You're such a politician," because every single meeting I'd have, depending on the stakeholders, I almost shift to meet
Yeah.
those stakeholders' needs,
Yeah.
because you cannot speak to all your stakeholders or interact with all your clients in the same way, because their needs will be different. And it's based on their needs, will you adapt your communication to ensure that it works for them? So the finance guys, they just want to know how we're going to save money, when this is going to be ready, and where this, the
Yeah. Yeah.
marketing team, they want to know how can we be creative with
Hmm.
how can the system help our creativity without hindering how we deliver? So it's respecting that and understanding all of those stakeholder needs, but also from a delivery perspective, I think the model is not the same for CE and
It's not
FNO.
the same. So when you were talking there, Musonda, would you go as far to say, and because it's actually something I was thinking about the other day, because I've got a client that I was speaking to the other day was talking about they're going to start doing a D365 CE program of work, fairly large scale, complex piece of work. And from what you've sort of describing there is almost, you may well get someone who's a very good or who's got plenty of experience delivering Microsoft Dynamics CE programs. I guess what we're maybe saying is if someone was a very much a FinOps program manager and that's what they've done for their last 10, 15 years, that actually for someone like that to then cross over and try and deliver a CE program, culturally or how that's delivered potentially could be quite a challenge, because it is, in many ways, you're saying it's quite a different way and a different type of methodology. Is that fair to say in terms of how you might deliver a CE program to a FinOps program?
Correct. So with FinOps, you can deliver the hybrid of waterfall and agile. So you can do your development in an agile way, but everything has to almost be waterfall first, and then I don't want to use that word that everyone uses. The word, I hate it, but you know the word I mean.
Yeah.
The fusion between waterfall
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
agile. Whereas with CE, as I said, because it's so complex, it usually tends to be quite complex. You want to be full Scrum, and I enjoy Scrum. I don't know why people shy away from it, but yes, in your points though, with the person, the project manager, program manager has been delivering F&O, do I think it's impossible for them to deliver a CE program? No. What I do think becomes an issue is when they try to dictate to the delivery team what they think the best way is to deliver based on how they've previously done it.
I guess what I was alluding to there, and the point is that, and I guess it's a learn. And the reason I ask it is because when I sort of push this out into the real world, in terms of the conversations that I have with customers and clients that I'm dealing with, that's really useful for me to understand. But I think it's also really useful for organizations to understand that actually there is, if you are delivering a CE program, looking for someone that has got that specific, not just thinking, oh yeah, someone's done a Microsoft Dynamics project, because sometimes there is, people just think Microsoft Dynamics is one thing. They don't sometimes differentiate between the FinOps and the CE. And I know it's doing two totally different things, but there is a real value from speaking to you in terms of, if you're delivering a CE program, having someone that has delivered a CE program before and has got the experience of delivering something in that fashion. And I guess the role's reversed. If someone's only ever done CE, them jumping into a FinOps and a more, financial and operation program, there's a different way of doing that. So it is about finding the specialists, and like you say, where you've sort of, I guess, benefited greatly is having exposure to both. So, when an organization is doing what I call like a full transformation program, looking for people that have got experience of both, and not just thinking, oh, it'll be all right, they've got FinOps, they'll know how to do CE.
Yeah, correct. So if you think about it, that not just from the stakeholder, the business, the client's perspective, they want someone who knows what's happening, because you encounter challenges in programs. You want someone who can say, do you know what, on my previous program, when we encountered something like this is what we did and this is how we rectified it. And again, not saying that if you've only done F&O, you wouldn't know how to rectify CE issues, but with CE being mostly done in an agile way, you want to be able to understand how to set up the sprints, what to do with sprint planning, the capacity planning, and all of that good stuff in whatever tool you'd use, whether it's DevOps or Jira, whichever system you're comfortable with. But also from a stakeholder perspective, if someone has been doing F&O for FinOps for a long time, they develop the terminology. They understand what the stakeholder needs. So when you're in workshops or sessions with the client, you can speak their language. You can interact with them in a way that builds confidence. So if you just get someone who has CE terminology into a F&O space, you're already starting from a point of low trust. Whereas if you already have some lived experience, some worked experience that you can bring to the table, it just gives more confidence. What builder would you have? Would you ever have a builder in your home that has built an extension before, or someone's like, do you know what, this is our first time, we're going to try it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
no,
not
I
to
mean,
say
it's,
they can't do the job. No, they might be able to do the job, but it's just how well they can do it and the confidence that it gives you as the client who is working with this
yeah,
person.
it's a really good piece for people to think about when they're going on these journeys, and the people they're looking to engage. And as we were talking there as well, Musonda, and you mentioned about sort of that piece around people commenting around sort of being a politician. When you think about sort of project program management, what do you think makes a good project program manager? And I know we talked early on, as in you saying your friend recognized in terms of within you when you talked to, I think you'll be a good person at project manager. And I'm sure you'll do the same, over your career journey.
Mhm.
You'll probably speak to people when you're on programs, maybe you go into an end user program and you see a graduate that gets seconded onto the project. What is it, do you think, that, does make a good project program manager? Is there things that you recognize in people quite early on and think, oh, you'd be a good program manager with the right experience?
Yes. So I think it's the good communication. That is the strongest. Our job is pretty much mostly communication, because we are not the ones doing the technical work. We have a team of technical people doing the work. So you need to have the ability to speak the technical language with the technical guys. You don't have to be a technical person, but you need to be able to listen, take feedback from the guys, but also have um, the ability to tell them how to do things and when to do things based on your experience. But then on the flip side, you're in the middle. I always say, like, as a project manager, as a program manager, almost two-faced, because both these people are your clients, whereas if an organization, this is my client, but to me as program manager, my stakeholders who I'm delivering for are my clients, my team are my clients, because if the team don't like me and they don't work well with me, they're not
Sure.
going to do the work. If the client
Absolutely.
don't feel confident in me, they're going to lose confidence in the team. So like I'm in the
Sure.
middle, you almost shifting to protect the client, but also to protect your team. So communication is one of the biggest things. The second thing is having the ability, and I talked about this a lot because I think many people don't understand this, especially some project managers and some program managers, having the ability to understand who in your team you need to lead and who in your team you need to manage. And the reason I say that is I don't like being managed. I like being led.
Hmm.
Tell me what I need
Yeah.
to do and I'll get on with it.
Yeah.
There's some people who need to be managed, and they need to be managed because that's their personality and that's their like. But as a program manager, project manager, you need to recognize who in your team needs that. Because when you try to manage the people that needs to be led, you're going to frustrate them. When you try to lead the people who need to be managed, they'll fall
Hmm.
behind because
Yeah.
they're not getting what they need from
I
you. So
understand.
communication, ability to recognize your management style and what people need in your team and which management style works best for each of the team. I think the reason that I have managed to build great relationships with most of my teams, some people I worked with from 5 years ago will still message me and say, "Hi, just letting you know I got a new job and this," because I almost know who needs that additional one-on-one. And then also, you need to build relationships well, both ends. So not just communicating, saying, I'm going to do things, doing what you say you're going to do, because that's what
Absolutely.
builds trust.
Hmm.
Programs fail
Delivery.
because people lose trust. And
Hmm.
if your team lose trust in you, if the client lose trust in you, you don't really have anything left there. So in order to build trust, you have to have integrity. Say what you're going to do. When you say what you're going to do something and you don't do it, say why it hasn't been done. And don't say it when it's already should have been done. You say at the time. Again, it's linked to communication. But I do think integrity in its own needs to be mentioned because it's a factor that builds trust. And when you build trust, it's easier, to get change requests in. It's easier to get sign off for things. It's easier to ask for additional work, because there is a level of trust there. And that only comes from doing what you say you were going to do at the time that you said you were going to do it. And if you don't do it,
Hmm.
come back and say why it hasn't been done in advance, not after the time has
Hmm.
passed. So
Yeah.
communication, integrity, but also managing the right way, manage versus
Hmm.
led.
Yeah. I think it's a great insight there because I remember sort of, and I watch various sports and things like that, but I always think about like a sports coach, or like, if you're managing a team of 11 people or 5 or 6 people, those people are all going to have different personalities, and it's
Mhm.
not, you can't motivate them as in like a one size fits all. It's like every individual person within that team. And I can imagine managing a program is a very similar thing. And exactly what you pinpoint there is, some people need a different style to another style. And if you just go into, and I think sometimes maybe that's where some people maybe get it slightly wrong, is that they think, well, no, my style is I'm direct. I will just be very driven as like, this is where we're going. You're going to come with me. And if you don't want to come with me, then you can kind of get off the train kind of thing. And I think maybe, and look, I don't want to, but maybe 15, 20 years ago, maybe that was a style that worked, that like that's how things had to be. But I think in the day and age that we're living in now, the adaptability and the ability to recognize how you manage people differently is vital. Because if you don't, as in you say, if your team aren't coming with you, well, you're going to really struggle to deliver a large scale complex program on your own. Simple as that. I can imagine and a lonely place as well. You want to be part of a team.
Spot on. And I like that you mentioned about 20 years ago, that kind of leadership would have worked. Nowadays, we have Gen Z, and I absolutely love Gen Z. They get a lot of bad press, but I will stick up for Gen Z any single time. And the reason that I like them is because they're showing us the things that we've accepted as the norm in
Yeah.
organizations, in programs, in projects. They're not standing up for it.
Mhm.
When things are not going well and people are asked to work weekends, do this and do this to make things work.
Yeah, yeah.
Gen Z are like, we're not going to do that. And then we look at them
Mhm.
like, huh? What do you mean? But
Yeah.
actually, maybe if we manage our time
There's a
properly, we
balance.
don't have
Yeah.
to do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so correct. With leading, with understanding, we should lead now almost as a collaboration, making the team feel like they contribute. The amount of project managers that I have mentored or worked with where they'll say they were doing the plan by themselves. Why? As a project manager, as a program manager, there's no way I would do a plan by myself. I've got
Mhm.
solution architects, I've got technical architects,
Yeah.
I've got consultants. Consult the
Mm.
people who will actually be doing the work.
Yeah.
There's people
Collaborate.
that will be doing the work. Let them
Mhm.
tell me. From my experience, I know how much people need for config. I know how much people need for, to prepare for CRP, for example. I know how much they need to prepare for this. However, they will have some nuances that I don't know about because I'm not the one in the ground doing the work. They're the ones who go in the detail. So you need their input, but also from a human perspective, when you contribute to something, you feel like you're a part of it, as opposed to me just bringing you a plan. Here it's done. This is what you're going to do on this day. But if I say with them, right, guys, and sometimes they might push back and say, oh, that's too tight. And I might say, I know it's too tight. However, we need to do this because the client has this other
Yeah,
thing that they need to get
understanding.
done for this date. Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's just building the right level of relationships and managing people like that. There's a human on the other side.
absolutely. Yeah, very, very important. Do you ever see, are there any sort of common mistakes that you often see within transformation programs that lead to projects running over time and over budget? Are there some sort of, fairly common themes that you see, and you kind of can recognize it? You kind of get into a program, you can kind of see, or sometimes you come into a program, I can imagine you come into a program sometimes that has been run over time and over budget, and you look back and you think, I can see how that's happened, and I can appreciate sometimes these things. And I always say this with a caveat, because sometimes it's very easy to look back and say, oh, I can see why that's happened. Whereas when you're actually dealing with something in the time, there can be variables that someone can say, well, yeah, the project has gone over budget, but, the organization acquired 4 businesses in that same time that they then wanted to bring on to the solution as well, which they hadn't factored in. So it was always going to go over budget because the work volume increased, or whatever. But from a sort of a general standpoint, Musonda, when you think about it, is there something, a bit of a common theme when you see projects going or running over time and budget, and why that might be?
Yes. So there is the main common theme is starting when they were not ready. And what I mean by that is most organizations will have the CFO or the CEO or someone say, right, we're going to have this Microsoft product. We're all buying this. We're starting. They're bringing the Microsoft partner. Let's go. No one's clear on who owns that program, as in, if we run over by 10K, who's going to get shouted at? If we run over by 20K, I worked on a program where we were going over, I think the burn rate was about £15,000 a day, and we would be going over and no one was flinching. And from that point, this is going to fail because there's not a single person who owns the overall decision. So by readiness, I'm talking about understanding that, right, this is who we need. These are the resources that we've got. This is who the decision maker is. If we get to this point, is our house in order?
Mm-hmm.
I like to use builders as examples because everyone has builders in their home to do work. So,
Yeah,
before you bring the builders in, have we moved everyone out, or are we still using
yeah,
the rooms that we want to be extended out? So
sure.
understanding, is your house in order first? The second one
Yeah,
is pretty much linked to this, but it's the decisions. The pace of decisions tells you whether a program's going to fail or not, from the way that how long it takes to make decisions. Programs that succeed, the decision owners. If a decision is put on the table, there's a decision board somewhere, a steerco, some form of board that makes a decision that when the noise at the project level is going back and forth, you can go to that level and say, listen, we've got these 5 decisions that we need a decision today. And they'll say, tick, 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 let's go. These are the decision made. If that doesn't exist, that is 100% going to fail your program. Even if it's going well, at some point it will reach a header where you have to make a decision. And if there's no one to make that decision, it will undo all the work that's been done previously. And then the third bit, again, it sits under the readiness, is resources. So we need SMEs for workshops. We're talking before about finance team. We're talking about a marketing team. We need those resources because we're building it for them. This system is being built for them. We're not doing it to them. We're doing it for them and with them. So in order for me to build something for you, I need your input. I need you to tell me what you need to see. I need you to tell me what you do in your day-to-day job. I'm not talking about the written processes. I'm talking about those processes that have been fixed
Mhm.
up, that no one really talks
Yeah,
about,
yeah.
but you do it anyway. Those are
Hmm.
not going to be known by the partner that you've brought in to
Yeah,
implement
yeah.
your system for you. You need to tell them. But what tends to happen is you have the wrong people involved in workshops. So some people have been involved. And then when it's time to show the system, the people who actually use the system you're retiring are sort of like, what's that? We don't even do that anymore. that is a process that was written up, and no one's done that for 20 years, you know? And then I think the final bit is change management. Understanding that people change piece is, we always talk about change as if it's a negative thing and people shouldn't, resistance and this.
Mm.
Resistance is human. If I
Yeah,
come in your home
natural.
field and I say, you can't watch, you can't have your dinner on the couch while you're watching Netflix, you're telling me to leave your house and never come back. But if I
Yeah.
come in your home and I tell you, look, you know, why don't you have a tray while you eat your dinner? You start to think about, oh, this feels good. Slowly understanding benefits, showing the benefits earlier so then people can start to see why this change will be good for them. Because humans, naturally, we're selfish. What's in it for me? What does this mean? Am I going to lose the job? So if you don't manage that human element,
Hmm. That
you will
fear,
struggle, you
isn't
will
it?
meet resistance. It's a natural thing. It's look, we're talking about it with AI right now. Everyone is like, oh, what's AI
Hmm.
going to do? Because we're
Yeah.
looking at from a selfish perspective, what does this mean for
How
me
does it
and my
impact me?
career?
Yeah.
So whenever there's a transformation program happening, people are thinking about what happens with my job. They're having conversations at the water cooler, talking about, oh, I think they're saying that the team's going to be replaced by this system. It's you need to reduce that noise. And once the only way to reduce that noise is to involve the people that are going to be affected by this change, are going to be impacted by this change, so they can understand the value of this change. Because most of us, the time when transformations start, they're not starting because we want to penalize people, because we want to improve the way we work. We want to get a better system, and people need to know that's what's happening before they can actually buy into it. But that buy-in can only come if people feel involved in the
Yeah.
transformation.
And I think it's something that, as you're talking there again, Musonda, it refers back to one of the very first things you talked about. It's communication, isn't it? It's communication from the top down into why we're doing this. So the people, the SMEs, the users, they understand why we're doing this change. Why this transformation project is happening is because the end goal is this, and I think getting people into programs early, like yourself, and getting you people like yourself getting engaged early and speaking to these SMEs, making them feel a part of the project. Because at the end of the day, and it's something that you mentioned there, this is their system. They are going to own this. This is going to be something that once you leave, because you will eventually leave, the partner will eventually leave. This is something that they're going to be left with. So, and sometimes I hear it, I've heard the phrase a few times. Oh, the partner are delivering all that. We're just handing everything over to our partner, and they're going to deliver it all. And it's almost like that sort of sentiment. And you've referenced sort of the house building thing, and it's something that people have mentioned to me in the past. But it's almost like saying to a builder, "Build me a house," and then you turn up 12 months later and say, "Oh, well, I don't like that house." So if you don't tell people what you want, what rooms you want, what bathrooms, and how you want your kitchen, then you're going to just get the most basic model. You've got to invest your time and energy and get people involved in it that are important. And sometimes it does mean, as I understand, taking key stakeholders, key users out of the business and putting them on a program, because you need the good people involved. Is that kind of fair to say?
Yes, but the problem that I see most of the time is they do bring the good people in, but then they still keep them on their day job. So they're fighting
Yeah.
between the BAU activity and then
Mm,
being involved in the project. So what you're finding is sometimes they're dipping in and out of workshops, they're dipping in and out of meetings because they've got their
yeah.
day job responsibilities that
Yeah.
haven't just taken off
Difficult.
them. So no one has backfilled the work that they do on a day-to-day basis. And then you still and then the partner, by the way, is still billing you. The consultants that you brought on the program are still billing you for the work that they're working on while your SMEs are busy not being involved in this. But it's absolutely critical to have the people that will be working on the system involved in every level of the program, from the workshops to the development and the testing until go live, because they're the people that will stay, as you say, using the system once the partner goes off, once all the consultants are brought and go off as well.
Absolutely. And one, when I look at it, and again, and if I move sort of onto the flip side of looking at sort of good and great programs, what's one sort of, I guess it's probably the wrong terminology, but what's one sort of slightly boring thing that good and great programs seem to get right or seem to do consistently, or when you've been involved in parts of programs and you think, yeah, and maybe it's what's sometimes the most simplistic thing maybe an organization can do that can help aid a successful delivery, I guess is maybe a better way of phrasing it.
Two things. Number one, dedicated resources. 100%. The best programs that I've worked on had dedicated resources to the program, as in the people that already know the organizations, they know their processes, they know the internal politics, they know how things are, dedicated to the program. And two, understanding who the key decision makers are. One of my favorite programs to this day, we had one product owner. He was full time, but he was also the key decision maker full time. And it was so smooth, so smooth. And if I could lift and shift any program, it would be that. Have the right resources dedicated to the program, have the right decision makers who have autonomy to make decisions, by the way, not I've got to go and ask Mr. So and so before I can make a decision, or we need to wait for this person to come back on holiday to make a decision. So the decision makers and having full time dedicated. And no, it's things that people say, well, yeah, we usually do, but do we really? Because what I see is, yeah, this is a finance team, they'll be fully involved in the program. This is a marketing team, they'll be fully, and then you put in a workshop. So sorry, finance have got
Yeah.
another
Can't do that.
internal workshop, and then you've got to move the sessions and you move the sessions. And when you're burning through money on a daily basis with partners, with consultants, with teams engaged, you can't have that.
No, absolutely not. And when you think about it in terms of, and it's sort of similar thing, but if you're sort of facing off with a CIO and they're signing off a D365 program, is there any sort of one singular piece of advice that you'd give someone like about to start that journey where you sort of think like one thing, just make sure you do that above and beyond anything, make sure you get that right?
Define who your decision makers are. And I know I keep going
Yeah.
on about this, but
Yeah.
every single program, I've picked up a lot of recovery programs in my career. Every single recovery program I've picked up, when I've asked who is the decision maker, there's been ums and ums and, oh, this person decides on that, and then that person decides on that, and that person. There was not a single person with full autonomy where if this decision, and don't get me wrong, you will have technical people that might decide on this. You might have a SME that decides on this, but there needs to be someone who has complete oversight that says, right, okay, I can't think of a show or anything that they have that where people will say and then say, I've made my decision. Lord Sugar, Alan Sugar, for example, they'll give their feedback. Oh, I think you should fire this person. But he says, I've made my decision. Whatever the two side people he has would say, it doesn't matter because he is the full decision maker. So that understanding, whether it's the CIO saying, I'm picking this up, if he commits or she commits to being the sponsor and the decision maker, they need to be available and involved in the program.
Yeah.
Not where the only touch point is here and there. And when you have to get their decision, it's, you've got to replay everything else that has happened.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
if there's a consistent stakeholder that allows you to bring your decision points, the key decision points that are felt to happen once a week, once every 2 weeks, whatever the cadence might be, but there just needs to be a decision point somewhere where you can say, right, I'll draw a line over this. This is my decision. Let's continue. Because when you don't have that, that's when you go from 1 week delay, 2 weeks delay. And when you're burning budget, like I said in a program, which is doing 15K a day, that is insane. So that, but also just making sure that you're ready. Do we have the resources? Are we actually ready as an organization to do this? Maybe bringing in someone to do some training, to train your team what to expect on a project, because that is normally put on the partner. And some partners are really good at helping you prepare and get ready for
Yeah.
project, but
Absolutely.
that's not really their job,
No.
unless you bring in a consultancy whose particular job is just to get you ready for a program. But when you onboard a partner and expect them to get you ready, that's when you just expect the partner will say, yes, let's go, because who's turning down revenue?
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. And I think, Musonda, as we're talking on this point, the importance of bringing in a really good program manager early on in the program that sits on the customer side, working in collaboration with the partner. And I think this is something that's really important, is that collaboration piece. It's not, you're not bringing in a project manager to, challenge the partner. There may be times that, yes, they may need to do that in the best interest of the customer that they're working with. But is that fair to say that you think, if customers are, they're embarking or they're in the infancy of, of a program, or they've made a decision to implement Microsoft Dynamics C365 or any other ERP or CRM system, that bringing in their own program manager will, I guess, to a certain extent, create a greater level of assurance of a successful delivery?
110%.
Yeah.
However, what I do find is, this is why, like I said, I get caught into a lot of recovery programs, is people do not see the problem until they are in the midway, and then you have to help them recover. So then they bring you in because they expect the partner PM or partner program manager to be their program manager, or they might pick out someone in the team who has been really good. She coordinates all the things in the organization. She's so brilliant. She becomes the PM. So yes, she might be challenging the partner and saying, you haven't done this or do this, but she doesn't know what needs to happen when, and
Yeah.
picking up risks. Risks is
Yeah.
key, being able to
Identifying it.
foresee, like, if you think at this point we should already have had this and you haven't had
Hmm.
it, if you've got the
Yeah.
experience, you pick it up. And the collaboration thing, I really like to say the collaboration with the partner, because I do see a lot of organizations that look at their delivery partner as a supplier. Instead of looking at them as a partner, you're collaborating. So if we're collaborating, we need to almost have equal measure resource. What the partner has got needs to be equal on the side of the client. You don't have that often. So if the partner has a program manager, you need to have a program manager, preferably that one that came in. I absolutely agree. One that came in before your program started, because they'll tell you and help you identify at what point your program should start before that ticking 1,500, 2,000 a day rate has started with your consultants, right? So you clearly understand at what point do you think as an organization will be ready. That program manager can do that for you. Assess where you are, assess your readiness, help you prepare your teams on what project expectations are, align on what workshops would look like. Just those basic things that you don't want to be spending money bleeding into a program when people have already been onboarded, but also remembering that the partner have a job to do, which is to deliver this system for you. They don't know your organization. They might build knowledge of your organization over time, but you know your organization, and only the people working within your organization can 100% say they're on your side. And again, not saying that partners are taking advantage of clients. I know some really good partners. I've worked with some really good partners and I've partnered with some good partners as well. However, there are some that are very much money focused and just purely about, let's just sign it and get started, knowing full well the client's not ready, because they know they'll just do a tender request anyway and get more money from the client. But yes, absolutely. If you can bring in someone beforehand to help you prepare, to make sure you're ready, tick, have we got this? Yes, yes, yes. Do we feel ready? Yes. That might
Yeah.
cost you
A little more upfront.
£20,000, £40,000, but that might save you a few millions in a big program,
Absolutely.
right? Because isn't
Yeah.
the average about 27% of the program budget
Oh, yeah.
when
Yeah.
it goes over? That is a lot of money if your transformation program is £10 million.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that's such a key piece, isn't it? It's you spend a little bit more up front, set the foundations of the program right, and you will save money at the end. And it's not a case of taking shortcuts, but it's just having the recognition to think early on and have the awareness early on to set the program up right from day one. And if you do that, you've got a far greater chance of success. Musonda, thank you so much for all your insights and chatting with me. One thing before I let you go. If you weren't doing the job you're doing today, as in your day job, and I'm going to call being a program manager your day job, because I know you
Yes.
do some other things. What else would you do with your time if you weren't a program manager? If you think you hadn't have gone into program management, what do you think you may be doing today? And it probably links into a little bit of what you're doing externally, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you do in addition to your program management job.
I think when I was younger, I always said I wanted to teach, but I didn't have the patience to teach. If that
Yeah,
makes
yeah.
sense.
Yeah, no, I get
So
it.
what I'd like to teach and help, but I also don't have the patience. If people don't get it, I'm like, oh, do you know what? You don't get it. So where I've found that balance is mentoring. So I mentor and I coach people coming to project management, people already in the project management space who are trying to improve their project management skills. But I also mentor people that are trying to just find ways in their career,
Yeah,
as particularly help a lot of Black women in the corporate space, because
amazing.
there is a lot of things that, cultural backgrounds that affect how we show up in work. For example, being of Zambian background, I'm raised with, you've got to respect your elders. And that sometimes, and I didn't think it was an issue because it's never been an issue for me, but speaking to one of my Zambian friends, she was like, I really struggle to challenge my boss in work because,
Hmm.
and I
Yeah,
never,
yeah. Just
because he's
culturally,
older
yeah.
than me, it's a cultural
Mm.
thing, even like,
Mm.
some of my mentees are Asian and they would have
Hmm.
the same thing, Asian women would have
Sure.
the same thing. So I have found a lot of love in mentoring and coaching, and I think that gives me purpose. Oh, and
Oh,
then I
good.
also speak. I recently started speaking professionally, and I had been speaking for a long time. I started speaking when I was 15, public
Hmm.
speaking. I won a public speaking competition representing Liverpool when they were awarded Capital Culture in 2003. So I started speaking that then, but in the last 2 years, I've started speaking a lot more on a professional level and being invited into organizations to talk about leading successful teams, how to set up successful projects and programs and ensure they succeed. And also talking about diversity and inclusion, which is something that I'm passionate about, being a Black woman in the technical space. Um, and also just motivating people, just,
Yeah.
life is hard, especially lately, just encouraging them that sometimes you just have to take up the opportunities when they come your way, and you know what's the worst that could happen? So yeah, that's what I'll do is coach full time, speak full time, if that's a
Well, there you
thing.
go. When the thing is, the timing may well come. I'm sure, from talking to you today, you're an incredibly engaging individual. You know what you're good at, and you certainly are very good at doing what you do as a day job as a program manager. And I know you've got lots of change coming on in your personal life in terms of moving, and
Yeah.
I'm sure that will create lots of wonderful new opportunities. And just as much as anything, Musonda, just thank you so much for spending some time talking with me today, sharing your insights. I think the audience will find it incredibly insightful to hear about your hints and tips. And if there are any people out there that want to connect with you, I'll please drop a note on any of the comments or social media pages, and I'm sure you'll drop them a note back and connect with anyone that may want to have a little chat with you, if that's all right.
Sounds good. My LinkedIn is just my name, Musonda Veronica. So yeah, thank you so much, Bill, for having me.
Thank you for joining us on the Catch Up podcast today. Please make sure to subscribe on your preferred podcast app and head over to YouTube for the full video version.